Racist police thought they thwarted an FBI mission by arresting a black man until the boss walked in. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Hands where I can see them! The shout ripped through the morning air like a gunshot. Tires screeched. Coffee cups froze mid-air. And somewhere between the echo and the silence, a black man in a navy jacket dropped to his knees on cracked asphalt. His name was Agent Malik Turner, but the officers didn't care about names, only skin tone, posture, and the color of fear they thought they saw. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe dignity shouldn't depend on appearance, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Malik. The scene wasn't chaos, it was choreography. 2 patrol cars boxed him in like prey. One officer, Sergeant Doyle, white, mid-40s, wore his authority like armor. His badge gleamed, but his conscience didn't. FBI, huh? He scoffed, kicking Malik's ID toward the gutter. Nice try. We've seen fakes cleaner than this. Another officer, Rookie Jenkins, tried to hide his hesitation, his hand hovering near his holster, as if justice came with a trigger. Malik's wrists hit the pavement. The cuffs bit cold and tight. He didn't resist. He'd learned long ago that calm scares racists more than rage. A camera blinked red across the street someone was filming. The crowd grew, whispers thick with disbelief. He said he's federal, one woman murmured. Then why's he on the ground? The answer came in Doyle's sneer. Because not everyone with a suit gets a badge. In Malik's ear, the earpiece crackled, faint but alive. Agent Turner? Status? A voice whispered. He couldn't answer. His face was pressed to the asphalt, the smell of oil and concrete mixing with humiliation. A flashback hit 15 years earlier, 16 years old, stopped outside a convenience store, same stance, same words, hands where I can see them. Only difference. Back then, no badge, no backup, just skin and suspicion. Now he had both, and it still wasn't enough. Doyle leaned closer, voice low but sharp. You think that fancy accent's gonna save you? Out here, you're just another suspect. Malik's jaw tightened. Inside, the anger didn't flare it focused. He scanned the scene upside down. 6 uniforms, 2 vehicles, 1 dashcam still running. Evidence. Always evidence. In the reflection of the police cruiser, he saw his own face, steady, unreadable, dangerous only because he refused to be broken. The onlookers murmured again as Doyle barked for transport. Then a second sound cut through the air, the heavy click of boots on asphalt, measured, deliberate. From behind the line of flashing lights, a figure approached female, crisp, black suit, mirrored shades, calm as a verdict. Every officer turned. Doyle frowned. Can I help you, ma'am? She lifted her badge to eye level. Assistant Director Hayes, FBI Internal Affairs. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was judgment finding its voice. You just handcuffed one of my agents mid-operation, she said. Congratulations, Sergeant. You've officially obstructed a federal mission. The crowd gasped. Phones rose higher, and for the first time that morning, Malik allowed himself a breath, not of relief, but of reclamation. The real storm was just beginning. The silence that followed Assistant Director Hayes' words hung thick enough to choke on. Every officer froze. The only sound was the hum of the patrol car lights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Sergeant Doyle's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Malik Turner, still on his knees, felt the weight of 100 eyes turn from judgment to confusion. Hayes' voice was steady, calm, dangerous in its restraint. Uncuff him, now. The 2 words fell like a gavel. Jenkins hesitated, his hand trembling as he fumbled for the keys. The metallic click of the cuffs unlocking was louder than the sirens. Malik stood slowly, rubbing his wrists, his gaze level and unreadable. Doyle tried to recover his authority. Ma'am, with all due respect, he matched a suspect's description. We had probable cause. Hayes tilted her head, her mirrored lenses catching the red and blue strobe of their mistake. Probable cause or probable bias, Sergeant? She asked. A murmur rippled through the small crowd that had gathered, phones still raised, recording every word. Doyle shifted his stance. "We were protecting an ongoing investigation," he muttered. Hayes's tone cut sharper. "No, you just jeopardized one." She stepped closer, her presence pulling the oxygen out of the scene. "This agent was operating undercover. You compromised months of work because you could not see past your own prejudice." Doyle's face flushed. "I did not know." "That is the problem," Hayes interrupted. "You did not care to know." Malik watched quietly, every muscle controlled. Inside, the memory of the pavement still pressed against his skin. He thought about all the men who never got a boss to walk in for them. He thought about his father, who was once dragged out of his car in Alabama for driving suspiciously. History, he realized, does not repeat, it gets recycled. Hayes turned toward him. "Agent Turner, are you hurt?" "No, ma'am," Malik said, his voice even but weighted. "Just delayed." The phrase carried a sting that Doyle understood too late. Hayes faced the bystanders, her voice rising enough to carry. "This is what happens when authority forgets accountability. Record this part too," a woman near the front whispered. "We already are." The scene was no longer about one man. It was about a system unmasked in real time. Malik adjusted his jacket, the FBI crest faint under his sleeve. "Permission to continue the mission, ma'am?" Hayes nodded once. "Proceed. And Sergeant Doyle, you will remain here until Internal Affairs arrives. Hand over your weapon and badge." Doyle blinked, stunned. "You cannot be serious." Hayes's tone never changed. "Deadly serious. You just detained a federal agent based on his skin color. That is not law enforcement. That is profiling." Jenkins looked away, shame crawling up his neck. The cameras kept rolling. The truth was recording itself. Hayes turned back to Malik. "Your restraint just saved this department a lawsuit and the city a scandal." Malik gave a faint, tired smile. "Ma'am, restraint is the only weapon that does not backfire." Hayes almost smiled too. Almost. Then she looked at Doyle one last time. "You called yourself an officer of the law. Today, the law answered back." And with that, Malik Turner walked past the flashing cruisers, past the gawking crowd, into the night that had almost erased him. The lights behind him still spun red and blue, but now they looked more like warning signs than authority. The next morning, the city woke up to headlines that burned across every screen. "Black FBI agent wrongfully arrested by local police." The footage had spread overnight, every second dissected, every pause replayed. Malik Turner sat in a windowless briefing room at the federal building downtown, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead matching the static in his mind. Assistant Director Hayes stood at the far end of the table, her arms crossed, eyes locked on a digital display showing the viral video. 3 million views in 8 hours, she said. "You have become the face of everything this department pretends does not happen." Malik leaned forward, voice low but steady. "I did not ask for that," Hayes replied. "You did not have to. The truth asks for itself." She turned off the screen. The room dimmed, but the tension did not. "Do you want to file formal charges against the officers?" she asked. Malik shook his head slowly. "No, I want a formal review. Not just them, the system that lets it happen." Hayes regarded him for a long moment. "You sound like a man who is done playing by the book," Malik replied. "The book was written by people who never looked like me." Hayes's expression softened slightly. "Then maybe it is time we start rewriting it." A knock at the door broke the silence. An agent entered with a folder marked Internal Affairs and handed it to Hayes. "The mayor has called twice," the agent said quietly. "The governor once, and CNN wants a statement." Hayes exhaled. "Of course they do." She opened the folder and skimmed the report. "Sergeant Doyle is suspended. Jenkins has requested a transfer. Their chief is under review." Malik stood, pacing once before stopping at the window that overlooked the city. Below, life went on as usual, people driving, walking, oblivious. "They thought they were stopping a suspect," he said quietly. "They actually stopped a federal counterintelligence op. If this had gone 5 minutes longer, we would have lost our target." Hayes nodded. "We already did. The asset pulled out after seeing the broadcast. This mistake just cost us months of work." Malik turned to her, the fatigue in his voice now edged with resolve. "Then we make it count, publicly. Not as scandal, but as proof that accountability is not optional." Hayes studied him. "You know what that means for you. Cameras, press, exposure. They will twist it." Malik gave a dry smile. Let them. Silence has never protected us. For a brief second, Hayes's hardened demeanor cracked into admiration. You are your father's son, she said softly. He fought battles in courtrooms. You fight them on camera. Malik nodded. Same war, different weapons. The door opened again, another agent entering. Ma'am, the police commissioner has arrived downstairs. He wants to apologize in person. Hayes looked to Malik. You ready for that? He met her eyes. I have been ready my whole life. As they walked down the corridor, the air felt heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. In the lobby, camera crews waited, flashes already igniting against the marble walls. Doyle stood near the podium, pale, his badge turned in. The commissioner approached, hand extended, rehearsed apology ready, but Malik did not take it. He looked directly into the nearest camera lens and spoke, calm and deliberate. This was not about one officer. It was about what happens when assumption replaces evidence. Today, I am not here for revenge. I am here for reform. The room went silent. Reporters leaned in. Hayes stood just behind him, expression unreadable but proud. Malik continued, Yesterday, I was handcuffed for doing my job. Today, I am here to make sure no one else has to wear those cuffs just to prove they belong. The flashbulbs burst like lightning, but Malik's voice never wavered. Justice is not a headline, it is a habit, and it starts now. The crowd erupted not in chaos, but in clarity. The press conference was over, but the storm had only begun. By noon, every major network in the country had aired Malik Turner's statement. Clips of his calm defiance looped on television screens in airports, coffee shops, and living rooms from coast to coast. Online, the hashtag #HandsOffBI trended at #1. Commentators called him everything from a hero to a troublemaker. Inside the FBI headquarters, Malik sat in a smaller conference room, watching the reactions unfold in real time. Assistant Director Hayes entered quietly, setting a folder on the table. You just changed the conversation, she said. Malik did not look away from the screen. Or maybe I just said what everyone already knew. Hayes studied him. You realize the Bureau is going to get pressure from both sides now. Law enforcement unions, civil rights groups, politicians, it is about to get ugly, Malik replied. It already was. We just stopped pretending it was not. Hayes's phone buzzed. She checked it, sighed, and handed it to him. The director wants you in D.C. tomorrow. He says you are being assigned to lead a new task force. Malik raised an eyebrow. Task force for what? Bias response and accountability, Hayes said. Your words at the podium forced his hand. They want to make it look like reform. Malik gave a faint, tired laugh. Looks like? Hayes nodded. Exactly. The optics of change. He exhaled slowly. Then we make it real. She smiled slightly. That is what I was hoping you would say. The next morning, Malik boarded a flight to Washington, D.C. The city shimmered beneath the rising sun, monumental and indifferent. As he looked out the window, his phone vibrated with messages, colleagues, journalists, strangers thanking him for standing up. One message stood out. It was from an unknown number. The text read, Keep your head high. Some of us have been waiting for you to speak. No signature, but the weight of it lingered. When he landed, 2 bureau cars waited at the terminal. He was escorted to the J. Edgar Hoover building, where the FBI director's office overlooked the Capitol like a judgment seat. The director, an older white man with a face carved by years of power, greeted him with a firm handshake. Agent Turner, he said, you have caused quite a stir. Malik met his gaze evenly. Truth usually does. The director gestured for him to sit. You are aware that this department does not handle internal politics lightly. What happened in that video has embarrassed more than a few people. Malik replied calmly. Then maybe they should be embarrassed. The director's lips twitched into what might have been a smile or a warning. This task force, bias response, and accountability is yours to lead. You will have 10 agents, full access to interdepartmental records, and the authority to investigate misconduct. Malik nodded. That is a start. The director leaned forward. You have one condition. Stay within the Bureau's chain of command. No grandstanding, no media. Malik's response was firm. I do not grandstand. I do my job. The director's eyes narrowed. Do it well. The country is watching. Hours later, Malik walked through the Bureau corridors, where agents whispered his name like a rumor that had come to life. Some nodded with respect, others turned away. The silence spoke louder than any applause. Inside his temporary office, he placed a photo of his father on the desk, a younger man in uniform, eyes burning with the same quiet conviction. Malik whispered, "We are not done yet, Dad." Outside the window, the American flag rippled against a gray sky, not in celebration, but in warning. The battle ahead would not be fought in streets or press conferences. It would be fought inside the very walls that claim to stand for justice. Malik Turner's first week leading the Bias Response and Accountability Task Force felt less like a promotion and more like walking into a battlefield disguised as an office. His new team was a mix of volunteers and transfers. Some believed in the mission, others were there because they were told to be. Every morning at 7, they met in a cold briefing room lined with framed portraits of former directors, men who had never imagined someone like Malik sitting at the head of that table. On the second day, he began reviewing body camera footage from departments across the country. What he saw was not new, but it still burned. Officers escalating without cause, reports edited before submission, silence filed under procedure. By noon, he had already flagged 8 incidents for internal review. When an older agent named Grayson leaned back in his chair and muttered, "This is going to make us enemies," Malik answered without looking up, "Then we are doing it right." Later that week, Assistant Director Hayes joined him in Washington. She stood at his office door with 2 coffees in hand. "You are making waves," she said, handing him one. "The director is getting calls from every police chief east of the Mississippi." Malik smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe they will start reading the reports instead of burying them." Hayes sat across from him. "You are building something dangerous, you know. Not everyone wants the light turned on." Malik looked at her and replied, "I am not here to make them comfortable." That night, after the building emptied, Malik stayed behind, surrounded by files. One video caught his attention. The timestamp read 3 months before his own arrest. It showed a young man, unarmed, detained by 2 officers for matching a description. The man never made it to booking. The report said, "Resisted arrest," but the footage said otherwise. Malik leaned back, eyes narrowing. It was the same precinct, the same Sergeant Doyle. His pulse tightened. The next morning, he requested a full audit of Doyle's record. Hours later, an encrypted email arrived from an unknown source. The message contained a single sentence. "He was protected by people higher than you think." Attached was a file of internal communications emails between Doyle and a regional law enforcement board that approved misconduct reports without review. Malik printed every page, spreading them across the table like evidence in a trial. Hayes entered mid-afternoon and stopped cold. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Anonymous tip," Malik replied. "But it matches the pattern." Hayes scanned the papers, her brow furrowing. "If this is real, we are looking at a cover-up that spans multiple agencies." Malik nodded. "Then we expose it, publicly." Hayes shook her head. "The Bureau will not like that." Malik's voice hardened. "The Bureau does not have to. Justice does." That night, he drafted his first internal memo, demanding an interagency review of racial bias complaints. Before he hit send, he hesitated for a single breath, thinking of the faces on those videos, the silence that followed every excuse, and his father's old words, "When they call you angry, it means they finally heard you." He pressed send. The next morning, the director's office would explode with phone calls, but Malik Turner had already decided he was done waiting for permission to do what was right. By the end of the second week, Malik Turner had become a name whispered in hallways and echoed across news panels. Inside the Bureau, some called him a reformer, others, a traitor. He did not care which. What mattered was that the truth was finally on paper. His memo had triggered a federal audit, forcing dozens of local and state agencies to surrender their misconduct files. The data was staggering. Thousands of unreviewed cases, hidden settlements, and disciplinary actions quietly erased. Malik stared at the numbers until they blurred, then leaned back in his chair and muttered, "They built a system that deletes guilt faster than it finds it." Assistant Director Hayes entered with a folder. "You have got senators asking for briefings, and the director is under pressure to suspend you." Malik looked up slowly. "For doing the job he gave me?" Hayes shrugged. "For doing it too well." She placed the folder on his desk. "Inside are the reports from the internal audit. You need to see this." He opened it, flipping through photographs and documents until one stopped him cold. It was an image of a police precinct's closed-door meeting, Doyle seated at the table, flanked by two men wearing suits marked with the Bureau's insignia. Federal liaisons, Hayes said quietly. They were supposed to be monitoring the precinct. Instead, they were signing off on every rejected complaint. Malik's voice dropped to a whisper. They were protecting him. Hayes nodded grimly. And if those signatures are real, it means this went all the way up the ladder. Malik rubbed his temple, the weight of the realization pressing into his chest. So they buried their bias inside bureaucracy, he said. That is how it survives behind policy and paperwork. Hayes hesitated, then spoke. We have one chance to bring this to light, but it will burn careers, including yours. Malik smiled faintly. Then it is worth the fire. That night, long after the building emptied, he sat alone in his office, the glow from his computer reflecting against the glass wall. He began compiling a classified report, linking every pattern, every falsified review, every officer shielded by procedure. The further he dug, the darker it got. His cursor hovered over a familiar name. Deputy Director Charles Whitmore, the same man who had once overseen internal affairs. Malik exhaled sharply. The web was not a coincidence. It was a design. Suddenly, the lights in his office flickered. A message popped up on his encrypted line. Stop digging. You are in over your head. No sender. No trace. Malik stared at the screen, then calmly disconnected the cable, powering down the machine. Fear was a luxury he had learned to live without. The next morning he handed Hayes a sealed envelope. What is this? She asked. Contingency, he said. If something happens to me, you take it straight to the Justice Department. Hayes frowned. You think they will try to silence you? Malik's eyes were steady. They already tried. Outside, rain began to fall, washing the city in streaks of gray and reflection. Malik looked out the window and said quietly, They mistook silence for submission. That was their last mistake. The words hung in the air like a promise. For the first time, Hayes understood Malik was not fighting for his career. He was fighting to rewrite the definition of accountability itself. The next morning began with the sound of news alerts pinging across every device in the building. Someone had leaked Malik Turner's audit findings to the press. The story broke wide open. FBI task force uncovers nationwide pattern of police bias cover-ups. The article quoted unnamed sources and referenced classified documents, word for word from Malik's report. Within an hour, his phone lit up with calls from the director's office, from senators, and even from journalists who wanted a statement. Assistant Director Hayes burst through his door, eyes sharp with urgency. Tell me you did not leak it. Malik stood calmly, buttoning his jacket. I did not, but I am not surprised. Someone did. Hayes exhaled. You just painted a target on your back. Internal security is already on their way. Malik replied evenly. Then they will find me exactly where I am supposed to be doing my job. Moments later, two agents entered, flanking a tall man in a charcoal suit. Deputy Director Whitmore, the same name Malik had seen in the corrupted files. His smile was thin and practiced. Agent Turner, he said, you have created quite a spectacle. Malik met his gaze without blinking. The truth tends to do that. Whitmore gestured toward the folder on Malik's desk. These documents should never have left your office. You violated chain of command. No, Malik said. I followed it, but it was broken. The air in the room shifted, cold and heavy. Whitmore stepped closer, lowering his voice. You have no idea who you are dealing with. Malik's tone stayed level. I know exactly who I am dealing with. People who confuse authority with immunity. Hayes moved between them. Deputy Director, if you are here to intimidate him, you should leave before you make this worse. Whitmore smirked. This is bigger than both of you. The Bureau cannot afford a public scandal, Malik replied. Then maybe it should not afford corruption either. Whitmore's jaw tightened. You are suspended effective immediately pending investigation. He turned to the two agents. Escort him out. Malik did not resist. As they walked him through the hallway, agents on both sides of the corridor looked up from their desks. Some turned away, afraid. Others nodded quietly, a silent show of respect. Outside, flashbulbs erupted as reporters swarmed the entrance. Questions flew through the air like debris in a storm. Agent Turner, is it true the FBI covered up bias complaints? Are you being silenced? Do you regret speaking out? Malik stopped at the bottom of the steps, the rain soaking through his coat. He looked straight into the cameras and said, You cannot silence what you did not create. The truth does not belong to me, it belongs to everyone who ever got told to wait for justice. The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat before the questions resumed. Louder, more frantic, Hayes pushed through the reporters, reaching his side. They will come after you, she warned. Malik gave a faint, unshaken smile. Then they will have to catch me doing the right thing. That evening, across every major network, his image played again standing in the rain, defiant, calm, a living contradiction to fear. Inside the bureau, Whitmore watched the footage from his office, his reflection overlaying Malik's face on the screen. He whispered to himself, "You think this is over? You have no idea what you just started." But deep down, even he knew it already was. By the next sunrise, Malik Turner had become a national flashpoint. News anchors dissected every word he had spoken on those courthouse steps. Some called him reckless, others called him brave. Across social media, people debated whether he was a hero or a threat. In living rooms, classrooms, and precincts, one question echoed louder than the headlines. If a federal agent can be profiled, what hope does anyone else have? Malik stayed silent. He had retreated to a small apartment outside the city, his phone on silent, his laptop encrypted and offline. The envelope he had given Hayes still sat in her desk, untouched but heavy with implication. That morning, she received a message from an untraceable number. He is being watched. She did not hesitate. Within an hour, she was at Malik's door, knocking hard enough to rattle the frame. He opened it, eyes tired but alert. "They moved faster than I thought," he said. "They always do," she replied, stepping inside. On the table, stacks of files covered every inch printouts of leaked documents, internal memos, redacted emails. Malik gestured toward them. They are not just hiding bias, they are weaponizing it, using race-based profiling to justify covert surveillance and arrests. It is systematic. Hayes looked through the papers, her expression hardening. "You have proof?" Malik nodded. "Enough to make every news outlet in the country stop pretending this is isolated." Hayes crossed her arms. "You know if you release this, they will come after both of us, not with warnings, with warrants." Malik's voice was calm. "Then we make it undeniable. We show the full pattern. No edits, no spin." Hayes met his eyes. "You are talking about taking on the Bureau itself." "No," he said. "I am talking about taking on the lie it hides behind." She stared at him for a long moment, then reached for her phone. "I will call a contact in the Department of Justice. If we move this through the right channels, it becomes uncontainable." Malik nodded. "Do it." That afternoon, while Hayes met discreetly with her contact, Malik returned to the federal building. He walked past the front security checkpoint as if he still belonged there. The guard hesitated but did not stop him. Inside his old office, the air felt heavier, the blinds drawn tight. His computer was gone. His desk had been cleared. But taped to the monitor stand was a single note written in neat black ink. "You were right." Beneath it lay a flash drive. Malik slipped it into his pocket without hesitation and left. Later that night, he met Hayes again at a quiet diner just outside D.C. The air smelled of coffee and rain. She slid into the booth across from him. "The department is scared," she said. "They want to investigate, but they are already getting calls from the Bureau." Malik leaned forward. "Then we give them something they cannot bury." He placed the flash drive on the table. "This was left in my office. If it contains what I think it does, it is the missing piece." Hayes looked at him warily. "You could be walking into a setup," Malik replied. "Or a confession." He plugged the drive into his encrypted laptop. Lines of code flickered across the screen before a file opened. A folder titled Project Meridian. Inside were classified directives, signed and sealed, showing the Bureau's cooperation with local police in data-sharing programs built on predictive racial profiling. Hayes's face went pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. Malik closed the laptop. "Now we know why they wanted me gone." He looked up at her, his expression unwavering. "This does not end in a courtroom. It ends in the open. They profiled the wrong man.